Spencer, nice to meet you. How are you doing today? Not bad. Nice.
All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the JDC West 2015 Human Resources Case Presentation. Thank you to our judges, Ann Minnings from the Ministry of Children and Family Development, Kate Lockhart from ANCO, Brent Bickerton from the Bank of Montreal, Lana Swalman from BC Investment Management Corporation, Mark DeFrias from Victoria Highlanders, and Guy Nisbet from Royal Roads University. Competitors will have a maximum of 20 minutes to present. Immediately following the presentation, judges will have a total of 5 minutes to ask the presenters questions. The volunteer timekeeper will show time cards at various intervals to indicate the remaining time and will stop any speaker who exceeds the maximum time limit. No questions, comments, cell phones, or picture taking will be permitted from the audience at any time. The audience is banned from any material that bears the name or symbol of a competing university. We ask that the audience exit the room immediately following the question and answer period. You guys can tell whenever you're ready.
Change. Why is it so difficult to embrace? The answer is simple. It's because we're human, and we inherently avoid the unfamiliar and don't like it. It's like in sports, when you're thrown a curveball or the play gets changed on the fly. What do? How do you react? Well, if you have the right coach, if you have the right players beside you, and you have the right fans in the stands, it becomes simple. So while people is usually what makes change so difficult, they are also the answer to make sure that it gets changed and implemented correctly. My name is Caitlin, and these are my colleagues Spencer and Joaquin, and we are from Solaris Consulting.
To provide you with a snapshot of what we'll be discussing today, I'd like for you to focus on our core question. How can Cambridge Eagles leverage its current resources to sustain its legacy? And from that, we have discovered 3 key challenges, such as the Blackpool fallout, having the Mundy Field not an ideal place to hold your game, and your leaving talent. But as with every game, and you're watching on the television screen around you, and you realize that your home team is not really hitting the right spot, what do? You go for the offensive. So if we go for the defensive push and continue playing during the 2014 season, through communicating to your stakeholders, engaging your community, and recruiting the right players for your team, ultimately, the Cambridge Eagles will be able to solidify a legacy for seasons and seasons to come. But before we jump right straight to that game plan, we need to determine some key issues at hand. Specifically, in terms of the Brickmill fallout, there's several challenges posed with having Brickmill suddenly fall out from his involvement with the team. First of all, the risk of having volunteers may leave. Second, Silver himself, which is a key player in the organization, has the ability to leave as well because of Brickmill's fallout. Another issue is having a defensive coordinator position open, as well as a new coach. So bringing in a new coach changes the culture, changes the strategy, it changes really the team dynamic. Another one is having limited communication to stakeholders, and I'll touch on that later. The last one is really sponsorship uncertainty. Currently, you heavily rely on some key players within the city, and the fact that Brickmill hasn't really been able to follow up with that relationship puts really future partnerships at stake. In terms of having the Mundy Field not an ideal place, the Poirier Field is currently under construction, as you know, in the next season. Another one is that, again, it has limited space, and I'll touch on that later. And lastly, in terms of leaving talent, a third of your team is currently injured, and that's really quite a big concern. Again, with the new coach, it does change how the team dynamic is and really how the environment of the team is. Another one is, again, the availability of that defensive coordinator position. Again, it's a key issue that we're facing with that. And again, like the coordinator might leave. But based on these issues and really how these issues come into play, there are a couple of key analyses that we'd like to discuss that really help build with a recommendation. And the first one, again, is in terms of Brickmill's fallout. Within the last week, he's just done quite a lot of activity that perhaps may be questionable, specifically in in terms of really that overall $24,000, which is really a key aspect to the operations, the financial operations of the team. And again, within those 7 days, he did resign from his post as really the head honcho for the team. Another one is really, certain teams exist within the home field itself. The communication between Silver, between Brickwell, and between the city aren't really consistent. And the key takeaway from his fallout is that really the sudden pullout of this involvement really endangers your relationship with your stakeholders, and that's something to really think about. Another one is your field space. So on your left-hand side, it's just a brief comparison of the field space that are available in Monday, which is an alternative, and the current season ticket holders. As you can see, there's a discrepancy of around 100 to 200 ticket holders, meaning they won't be able to watch the game in person. Another thing to consider is really Muddy Field has standing room only, but something that's quite interesting is you have a fan base of over 5,000 people, and that's huge. You have 3,000 radio listeners, around 1,300 online viewers, and around 800 live spectators. Currently you have 5 home games, and in terms of ticket sales, which really make up almost majority of your costs, that's around 60% of your costs. But the key takeaway when specifically moving to Monday is that there are more fans that are available to seats. You have a fan base. And that's really important to know as you really move forward to really to what options you have in the future. And lastly, in terms of recruitment. The diagram on your left side just really shows an example of the team makeup. And really one key important aspect of that is over 50% of your team is made up of former varsity players, so they're currently university students. But really the biggest key takeaway is really you're a winning team. The last 3 years you have been winning and winning and winning. You have a fantastic record since 2011 when you started. You made the playoffs. And you got this fantastic award of the new NFL Team Award. As well as really if you add that to your value proposition and really what is the contribution of Cambridge Eagles within the community, there is a high value proposition. There is an alternative for the members in the community who are perhaps seeking into future careers in the CFL or the NFL to use their opportunities to share their talent by playing for the Cambridge Eagles. But really the key takeaway here is that there is a great value proposition, but because there is a lack of talent in terms of your pipeline and leadership, the ability to be able to continue that moving forward does exist. But now I'd like to bring you to Spencer, who will gladly walk you through our recommendations.
Thank you, Joaquin. So now that we have kind of gone through not just a look at the issues currently facing your organization, but as well as an analysis of the situation at hand, it now turns to what strategy can your organization take to tackle this situation. And so the first thing we want to consider before recommending potential solutions for your organization is first, the critical considerations. And what these are 3 kind of criteria that essentially act as recommendations or the required steps needed or the required ingredients to make a recommendation worth recommending in the first place. And the first is financial viability. Given the current instability and volatility in your organization, you need to work within your constraints. The second is adaptability to change, and that's a huge component because no matter if you get Poirier Field back soon or if your strategy goes in certain directions, it needs to be able to adapt to the given environment. But not just that, you need to have that passion for the game maintained within fans, within sponsors, within your volunteers and your players as well. And that's a framework to start in a look into our alternatives. And so the first alternative for a strategy that we have identified for your organization is a defensive stop. So this is really serious as there is so much volatility with your organization right now that there is the potential to just, call it where we are now. With this, it's a very serious recommendation and we're not trying to, try to make it easy to swallow. What we want to say is that, yes, this is probably the most financially viable option for your organization, but you're building a legacy. This is the key part here, and you really want to keep on developing those fans. So this does not allow you to do that. And obviously, with adaptability to a different situation, if you're calling quits on this great success you've had, that's probably going to put a stop to that. In terms of the timeout strategy you could take, that's to suspend the 2014 season with this new field, that doesn't quite meet the requirements for your organization, won't necessarily raise as much capital because not as many fans can attend. But not just that, this is an opportunity to rejig your communication strategy and an opportunity to refocus your organization so they can continue further growth going into the 2015 season. But again, with this one, it's great for adaptability even as, compared to the first recommendation, and it is financially viable for your organization. But you're going to lose that momentum with your fans. But our final recommendation is that offensive push, and this is to keep on going forward, work within the constraints of your organization, develop additional ways to recruit new players, get your sponsors back on track, as well as to provide the opportunity for fans to engage in more meaningful ways with your organization in this one season where you'll be moving to Mundy Park before potentially moving back to Poirier once the renovations are complete in late 2014. So this does tackle a lot of the challenges, as you can see with all of this, and that is the strategy we're recommending, because in terms of ceasing operations, the main things to consider is that it's destroying that community and it's taking this overall NAFL franchise out of BC, and you're losing that community within this west coast of Canada. Not just that, the other alternative is just ultimately reducing that momentum and not allowing your organization to continue the growth it can experience. This is going to be a challenging year, and this is why we're here to help you work through it. So with our offensive push strategy, we really want to focus on three main components to ensure not just the success of the 2014 season, but your overall future success going forward. And the three main components are a communication and plan to stakeholders, engaging your community, and recruiting new players. And these are going to be more explained in depth as I go forward. In terms of the communication plan, the first aspect, you really want to touch base with those internal stakeholders. Working with Silver as he's kind of wary about continuing to coach for your team, and working with your volunteers who Bricknell's wife formerly coordinated, who are really within her realm. These are people you're really going to have to add that value, communicate the value of staying with the organization to. And finally, the players who have seen a lot of injuries recently. Not just that, with the Bricknell taking the money from sponsors, he hasn't yet remitted the money. He's considering it, but that's something that needs to be addressed as well. In terms of engaging external parties, the main thing to consider here is your sponsors. Your sponsors are the ones that help financially keep your organization alive as a semi-pro team that doesn't quite have the capital that an NFL or CFL team has. So you really need to focus on engaging them in this change plan and getting them involved in the process, as well as engaging your fans through potentially having a community meeting. This will be like a town hall at a local community center where you can tell them about the changes that are taking place. And not only that, allow this opportunity to connect with the players with the fans around the plans for the 2014 season and upcoming events to do with charity, which I'll discuss in a minute. Finally, the overall goals of the communication plan here is just to retain the support. And again, building a legacy with the strongest stakeholders at your side. Addressing the main thing here as that overall fallout with the Blacknell situation. In terms of engaging the community, there's a few components to this. The first is the game watching parties, and this is going to be like a tailgate party. This is an opportunity to get your fans together. Not all of them will be able to attend your events at Mundy Park. And this is a chance for them to really understand where that community around your team is. And so what we recommend with this is to involve the North American Football League as a sponsor to help with the screens and really getting that kind of overall communication of it to your fans as they're your marketing partner. But not just that, working with the city to secure a solid event space apart from Mundy Park where these fans can gather and really enjoy both home and away games. This is an opportunity, charge a smaller admission, sell some refreshments, some gear, and really allow your fans to really engage with this new season despite the changing circumstances. In terms of charity events, this is something that your organization holds near and dear, this community involvement. And so working by connecting players to go and volunteer at local organizations within Cambridge and allowing them to connect with fans in a more meaningful and productive environment that will also give back to the community itself is an opportunity for you to continue in building that engagement within the community. And finally, just the goals of this communication plan, developing a communication and sponsorship package with Goats and Yatsmen who are working on sales for your organization. And this is mainly focused on getting these people to sponsor the game watching events and to sponsor for the 2015 season, in arena advertising at Poirier Field. And overall, these are ideas to help address this problem with the field not being ideal. And finally, the last part of our recommendation is around the recruitment strategy. And the main things we want to focus on here are the recruitment first of the leadership team. So as you are moving into the head coach role, there is the need to recruit a defensive coordinator for your organization's coaching staff, but not just that, a volunteer coordinator as Bricknell's wife is leaving. So this is an opportunity to solidify the value to your stakeholders, and not just that, using stuff like local classifieds and community events to reach out to people that are interested in football in your local community to get on as a volunteer with the organization. And finally, the recruitment plan. And the recruitment plan is around the players. So really continue to work with the NAFL Combine, which you're currently working with to recruit players and working into the NAFL draft. But organizing your own Cambridge Combine to recruit local high school and college players, as well as scouting local college games. And the main focus here is to have that personal outreach to these players to allow you to handle those issues with injuries and really have a solid, full staff roster of players. And ultimately, we think this will help to address the challenges with leaving talent in your organization. And with this, talking about what you should do, and not just that, why you should do it, I'm going to pass on to Caitlin to talk a bit more about how you can do so.
Thank you, Spencer. For those of you who don't know, because Spencer had to explain it to myself, a combine is a practice where they run you through drills and see what you've got on the field. So now that you know what you do, like Spencer said, I'm going to tell you how you need to do it. And I know that there may seem like there's a lot of pieces to this recommendation, but I'm going to slow it down and we're going to go through it step by step. So first of all, in the communication with stakeholders, this is really the change management piece, and it's really about communicating, being transparent, and letting people know what's going on. To date, you've released 2 press releases, and they've been very short, just letting people know what's going on in a brief manner, and we're saying take that up to the next notch. The people you really need to communicate with now is the players who haven't received any direct communication so far, as well as your volunteers, to make sure that they stay on board, because they're going to be your change leaders throughout this process. So it's currently November 2013, and we've left a month for these one-on-one conversations with the volunteers, with Silver, with the players, to let them know that they're important members of this team and that they need to stay. So it's a month, but it's continuing the process where you receive feedback, go forward, figure out why they're, if they're resistant to change, why they're resistant, figure out what their motivational needs are and what their emotions are like. Also in November is a press release stating the new forward-looking and positive state of the team, that yes, we're experiencing difficulties, but we would like to continue the season, and we appreciate your support through this time. And then finally, also in the communication with stakeholders is the community meeting that Spencer was talking about. And this is where, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but you'll understand in a little bit, where you're going to tell them about the plan, where you're going to tell them what the 2014 season is going to look like, and how they can be involved, and what it's going to look like for them. So that will be at a local community center and run by yourself. So in the next part of implementation is to recruit the players. And part of that, as Spencer said, is to recruit the coordinators. So a new defensive coordinator and a new volunteer coordinator. And here it's really about reaching out to the networks you have. Because you're so involved in the community and because it's such a passionate team and everybody really loves the sport, those are the people you need to talk to. Put it out there. You're a great team. Like Joaquin said, you've got a winning season. You have a great future. And a position as a defensive coordinator is really attractive to someone who might want to be a coach for the NFL someday. So coordinators' job postings, we've allocated that for December 2013. Classified in the local newspaper as you're a very small town is also a good idea. And people working on those would be your communications coordinator, maybe your salesperson, is it's a bit of a sell this team and sell the position. The next is develop the recruitment plan. So before, the old coach did all the recruiting. He was the one who went out and scouted the local talent. I know you've had some apprehensions about what you would do and how you need to sell the positions to recruit on the team, but this is where that would come in handy. Your team coordinator is also a key person who would be involved in this process to learn about your value proposition, we can help you with that, and how to go out to these scouting events to sell it to the players. So that's 2 months, and then the actual recruitment, which we haven't included in the timeline because it's an ongoing yearly thing that happens every year, would be for 3 months, and then your season starts in May. So you have enough time for a month of training there as well. Then engaging with the community. Spencer said the partnerships, the sponsors, they're very important. We've left 2 months for that, and that starts immediately, because without them, the financial viability of the next season isn't going to be there. And then finally, scheduling and planning the events. We've left 3 months, and this is really contingent upon hiring the new coordinator for the volunteer position. We've allocated about 16 events. The great thing about a game watching party is it doesn't have to be a home game. So this is a way to increase the number of people that get to see your games and get to be excited and get to be involved in the team from 5 home games a season to 10, as well as 1 community event per month. So, as with any recommendation, there are a few costs associated with this. We've tried to keep it low because we know operational expenses are a major consideration. So classified ads for the job posting, we allocated $500. You gain leadership, you need to attract your employees, and the rental of the community center. We haven't included things like the new spaces for the parks because as the lease is being renegotiated and being bumped down to another location, there's some leeway there to negotiate with the city, and we expect that as a community they will want to get behind you. There are several risks associated with our recommendation, as always, and I'd love to talk about this more, but I want to be respectful of your time. So at this point, I'd like to open up the floor for questions.
I'd like to ask you a question about the impact on the revenues of the black space for fans in the actual park.
That's a big question, and we crunched some numbers. So if you have an average of 800 people attending each game at a cost of $5 per ticket, moving down to about 300 tickets per game, you're looking to make about $40,000 in revenue per year. So if by moving from 5 games to 10 games with these parties and charging $3, that covers about $25,000 of that expense, and you're down to $15,000 that you need to make up, which is where the sponsorships come in and getting in-kind donations to improving the sales of food and your gear and things at the community events that would hopefully bridge that gap as well.
Just kind of, sorry, just to touch on what was last. I mean, I thought it was great, good idea to help generate fan support, both home and obviously away. I think that's creative. Did you guys consider meeting with Parks and Rec potentially regarding bringing temporary features?
So just to make sure I understand your question correctly, getting Parks and Rec involved in terms of finding the spaces and getting these events going, or?
No, just in terms of, I think one of the reasons why you guys are creating that event, correct me if I'm wrong here, was to create revenue opportunities and engage the fans because there are not as many of them can come to the stadium.
Sure.
So just to be more clear with my question, because not many of them can get into the stadium, did you consider approaching Parks and Rec about more sense?
Yeah. So we did consider that option. The main thing we considered is that is a possibility. In the near future, as you build up to the season, it's still 6 months away. The main thing that we did implement the recommendation for is because there is, it's a small field. It doesn't have that pre-existing stadium, so this is mostly going to be standing room. So the main reason we want to develop this additional event is to accommodate for that space that is pretty small in Mundy Park, but to allow them to gather in an additional space for home games and for everyone to gather for the event of away games, so that it is an additional opportunity for fans to engage in the process. But yeah, definitely in the future we do recommend keeping close contact with Parks and Recreation about the Mundy Park as well as the upgrade support.
We sort of ran out of time on your risk mitigation, but tell us a little bit about your strategies around some of the key staff.
So quickly, this is a heat map, and on the horizontal axis we have likelihood of occurrence, and on the vertical it's the impact of the risk. So we're focused on the risks in the upper right-hand corner. And as I mentioned, those are the risks we identified. The volunteers don't buy in. The players leave the organization, or silver leaves the organization. So part of the mitigation for these risks is getting them on board early, understanding what their motivations are, their desires are, getting them on board with the change, and then giving them the knowledge and ability to implement the change. So that includes things like helping people learn how to recruit. Usually people know if you're a coach, like you're a born recruiter, you can sell your organization why it's great to work for them or join this team. In addition, it's about making sure that it's a short term. So emphasizing that this is one season out of many. So stick with us for 6 months, and we have 5-10 years of greater success down the road.
What can you
do you recommend to make sure we don't have another issue like this in the future from an HR perspective?
Well, definitely part of it is having a structure for that. So once we do get the buy-in between Silver and all the volunteers, is really having that meeting within the key players in the organization and say, okay, this is what happened before. What can we work towards not having it happen again? So really, currently, I don't think there's a current structure in terms of reporting, in terms of making sure everyone's accountable. So as long as we really get the buy-in, as long as we see that there is a future within the team, then more structures will be in place and a greater sense of accountability is there. Simply because if I was working for a team that's actually doing really well, I wouldn't really want to screw something up. I really wouldn't be the one to be blamed, not only by my team, but by the city. So because of the fact that you have really strong ties with your city, you have strong ties with your fan base. So really having those structures in place, once we ensure that the key players that we need in the